And hello to you, Dennis Stewart. Last week we were going to talk about important herbs for digestive conditions, but we got waylaid by some other interesting topics.
We did, Jane, we did.
And that was good. So we might get on to these herbs today, but you've got a little story you'd like to share with us. A happy beekeeping plumber.
Very, very interesting, Jane. As most listeners know, I'm an evangelist for beekeeping and the bees themselves. And that is paying off. A couple of days ago, we had a burst pipe in our home at Cessnock, and our friendly plumber almost immediately came out to address the job. And when he got there, I went up to him and said, "Look, I'm very sorry," I said, "but the pipe seems to be broken quite adjacent to where my beehives are." I said, "How do you feel about that?" He says, "No worry, mate." He says, "No worry." He said, "The last time I was here doing the same job, your wife gave me some of your honey." And he said, "When I tasted the honey and saw the setup that you had in your backyard," he said, "I fell in love with bees." He said, "Have a look at this." And he pulled out his phone and showed me a photograph, and my dear wife, a photograph of his backyard and the most immaculately kept beehives you've ever seen in your life. So there he was, raging, almost obsessed. I've never seen such a keen plumber who was gone, if you like, midstream into beekeeping. It was a wonderful conversation, a wonderful plumber, by the way, and of course comes from the Hunter Valley where all the best plumbers are. I've got to give them a plug. But isn't that an interesting story?
Excellent. He couldn't wait to come,
No,
could
look,
he?
it's interesting because my dear wife, who when he was there, I wasn't there, when he concluded the job, and they work very good, they're very good plumbers, these guys. When he finished the work, my wife, as she normally does, gave the tradesmen, including this gang, some of our honey. And they're always grateful for that. But it wasn't meant with any way to bribe the gentleman. It was just a gesture of, look, thanks for coming out so promptly. And as soon as the plumber walked in, it was almost a love affair with my wife because he and she, right from the start, had discussed bees, and here he was reporting back, if you like, back at home base, so to speak. Look at the photographs. Look what you've done.
To NURFM's Health and Naturally, 17 past 12. And Dennis Stewart, herbs. We were going to talk about some of these herbs, your favourite herbs to help with gut problems.
Well, we're going to start on that right away. Interestingly, Jan has just rang in to talk about meadowsweet, and it was a herb that I was going to discuss almost immediately because of its relationship to the gut, the upper gut in particular, but interestingly, this is one of those paradoxical herbs that puzzles the straight scientist because meadowsweet also has some useful mild analgesic and mild anti-inflammatory characteristics, and hence it's very, very frequently used in herbal medicine management for the milder forms of muscular and skeletal pain. Hence this lady ringing up talking about her experience, I think, with fibromyalgia. She's experiencing what meadowsweet can frequently do, even when taken as a simple tea. Now, let me emphasize this. Many, many herbs work just as well as concentrated herbal teas as they do as costly, sophisticated capsules or tablets. And meadowsweet is one of those herbs that, in my opinion, is probably best taken as a simple herbal tea. A couple of cups of meadowsweet tea a day can equate with more stabilised dosages of solid forms of the herb, as this lady has proven. So this is a puzzling herb because the straight scientist would say, how is it that a herb that has some characteristic anti-inflammatory and analgesic action can at the same time be called up, even in authoritative literature, as being one of the most useful devices for lessening acidity, reflux, even participate in helping manage chronic peptic ulceration? The simple answer is this, that one herb can contain multiple principles, and the fact that this herb functions as a mild anti-inflammatory agent and functions also as a useful remedy against reflux and other upper gut symptoms means that one chemical in the herb works at one level and the other chemical works at the other level, each one of them protects each other's action, so that here is a herb that has multiple actions due to its multiple chemistries, neither of which conflict with each other. A remarkable herb. When I first started studying herbal medicine many years ago, I used to read the literature of famous English herbalists. English herbalists are remarkable people. They fought the good fight when herbal medicine was going through some pretty rough time, when in fact the British Parliament was on the verge of banning herbal medicine. It was only the House of Lords which was able to get through what was called the Medicines Act of 1968, which gave to medical herbalists the right to continuing practicing. Frank Roberts was of that era, and he wrote a wonderful book, Modern Herbal Medicine for Digestive Disorders. And in that he made the verbose statement that meadowsweet, he referred to it as the normalizer of the stomach. And what he argued was that if there is overactivity, as in, say, what we used to call hyperacidity, or if in fact there is a suspicion that there is insufficient gastric activity, the herb would work well. Now, he was a very confident writer, influenced me a lot, but in modern times his ideas on meadowsweet have been confirmed not only in practice here by myself and many other herbalists around the world, particularly in Britain, but also in the literature. The British Herbal Pharmacopoeia, which I constantly mention, the greatest landmark in modern herbal medicine, in my opinion, in the English language, has a monograph on meadowsweet. Its botanical name is Filipendula. And in that monograph, the herb is put forward exactly as I have said. Peptic ulceration, mild arthritic symptomatology, all those sorts of things which allow me to say that for the milder level of symptoms, milder reflux, a lot of what you wouldn't call mainly big state disease conditions, but what we refer to as functional conditions. That is, there's no serious evidence of pathology, but the system is creating symptoms, keeping it simple. Meadowsweet is the herb to think about. I wanted to give it a mention first up today before we start talking about the three major European herbs. Keep in mind that European herbal medicine has developed, if you like, in an entirely different stream and a different climate, and sometimes their herbs have not been used as frequently and as confidently as they have done in English-speaking countries. But with reference to the three herbs that we'll take up momentarily, that is chamomile, lemon balm, and peppermint, it is the German literature in particular, in books such as Dr. Rudolf Weiss's book, Herbal Medicine, that gives us, and I mentioned that book for students of herbal medicine, practitioners of herbal medicine, it is easily the most modern, credible, clinical and scientific text on herbal medicine today. And it was in his text that we learn about these three remarkable remedies that are particularly effective for what I've referred to as functional gut conditions.
Lynn's rung in from Chisholm. Lynn, it's all about your fingernails, yes?
Yes, it is.
Hello, Lynn.
Hi, Dennis. Fingernails are splitting, like downwards, and across my nails they're flaking.
Okay.
So I've done, hard as nails, Revita nail.
All the things that you should do before you press the panic button.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And,
Lynn,
yeah.
are you vegetarian or vegan?
No.
Okay. Because sometimes dietary factors can impact on things such as this. Not that I have anything personal against either of those dietary routines, other than saying that if one is either of those, if one practices either of those dietary regimes, one must always monitor one's intake of good quality protein, as I'm sure is always done by people that know what they're doing with those two dietary systems. I'm a bit of a fan of vegetarianism, but I always mention that because over many years I have seen quite a few younger people present who have indiscreetly gone into dietary programs without adequate understanding of what was involved and the need to be, just monitoring what they're eating, and end up in what I would call unfortunate states of health. So that's just put in there as a bit of a how can you call it, a confident statement to say to people, little things can sometimes indicate bigger things. Now, let me just ask you a few questions. Have you had a word with your GP about it?
Yes, I have. He just recommended a nail product, hard as nails, something like that.
Okay.
I just wonder, I have had quite a lot of chemotherapy and radiation, but that was about 6 years ago now.
Yeah.
But I had 26 weeks of chemotherapy and 8 weeks of radiation.
Okay.
I'm just wondering if maybe there's something still in my system.
Look, I wouldn't be prepared to say yay or nay on that because I'm not an expert on chemotherapy. Presumably, your blood profile is good. I would be sure of that. Your medical managers would have made sure that all of your markers were back to normal. So I wouldn't feed too much into that. What I would suggest is that you try some simple things first. In our profession, we place great emphasis on the relationship of particular minerals to nail health. And if you have not already used silica, it would be one of the things that I would confidently recommend. It is, as you probably know, it's readily available without script, over the counter from our health food stores and pharmacies. It's a non-toxic substance, but over the years I have used it in various forms, both for nail conditions and also, interestingly, for hair conditions. So it would be the first starting point. Go to your pharmacy or your health food store and get a preparation. Sometimes they're named after the conditions for which they're used. I think there's a preparation called hair and nails or something like that, which is silica-based. I'd use that as a starting base, but also what I would do while you were there is purchase a broad spectrum mineral supplement, a broad spectrum, something that purports to give you all of the levels of minerals that your body might need, which they might not be getting. Now, that's a big call, but those things are inexpensive. They're worthwhile trying. I would go down that pathway before you did much more. The only other thing that I would say is, and we mentioned it briefly last week, there's a fascinating substance called allantoin. Now, not many people know about allantoin, but allantoin was one of the basic chemical constituents in the herb comfrey. Now, comfrey is not permitted to be used any longer, but the allantoin found in comfrey is found in other substances as well, and it can be purchased as a powder, and it's taken in very, 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 very low doses, even though it's very safe. And whilst it's primarily used to promote the knitting of bones, where you get conditions where the bones are very reluctant to heal, it has also developed a broadened reputation where it can be used in other conditions, and it might be worthwhile, if the use of silica fails, to think of allantoin, which is not that easy to get, not because it's rare or anything, but no one stocks it, but your pharmacist or a herbalist may have it. Try that direction. I think that might be able to help.
Thank you very much. That sounds good, and I will go and get all of that stuff today. Thank you.
It is Health Naturally on 2NURFM with Dennis Stewart. We're taking your questions, and Steve has rung in from Lambton. Now, Steve, your father has early dementia.
Yes, he does.
Yes.
Hello, Steve. How can we help?
Well, Dennis, I've been told about an oil, an MCT oil. It's about a coconut-based, I think, oil that is supposed to help memory loss and sort of spur the body into thinking a little bit better. Is that so or not?
Well, I'm not really familiar with what the term MCT means. Have you an interpretation of what that stands for?
No, I don't. It's just that's what it says on the bottle. It's MCT. It's a coconut base. It's just a pure coconut. It's got no taste to it or anything.
And no other active constituents with it.
No.
Oh, look, Steve, I'm reluctant to be negative, but coconut oil's coconut oil. As far as I'm aware, and as far as I'm aware, I'll preface my remarks by that.
Yeah.
As far as I'm aware, it has no what I would consider to be credible, proven benefits to be able to retrieve memory loss or anything like that.
Right.
But who am I? I'm giving an opinion. Unless
That's why I'm only asking the question. Yeah, exactly.
Unless there was something in the oil other than just straight coconut oil. Sometimes coconut oil is used as a carrying substance.
Right.
In other words, for instance, as far as I'm aware, some cannabis-based products, cannabis oil products, from what I understand, I'm not certain on this, sometimes coconut oil is used as a carrier oil for that, and there's a basis for that. But on this, I'd be cautiously sceptical. Well, I mean, coconut oil it's a good oil. It's a general health measure. It might be okay, but outside of that, I always with how advanced is your dad?
It's only very, very mild, but I just reading up and with my son-in-law and that, and we just we come up. Well, this oil,
Okay.
like I said, I don't know. All it says is MCT oil. I got it from a health shop, so
Okay.
I just can't. I can't tell you the full name of it.
Okay, Steve. What
Because that's all it's got.
I would consider you do is this. There are substances out there now that have reasonable support for the claims that they make to be useful in addressing the symptoms of early dementia. And you would have heard me talk for many years about ginkgo biloba. Now, ginkgo biloba is, to my opinion, still the best documented, credible substance to be taken chronically, particularly from the early stages of the condition, to give some expected benefit. I have the text of a conference that was held in New York, or quite a few years ago now, and the Professor Rapin was the chap that chaired the conference, and I remember in the preface to the conference's proceedings, he made the statement that at that stage, ginkgo biloba offered the best hope for dementia. Now, that was some time ago, but it has encouraged me to see it as a very useful substance, and I have recommended it. And not that I'm demented, but I take it myself because I believe it has potential to lessen some of the cognitive deficits that can occur as we get older. But have a look at that. But I will intrigue you with what I'm going to say now. There is a herb whose name doesn't give the overall level of indications for it. There is a herb called Orthosiphon stamineus. Now that's its botanical name, but it is known as Java kidney tea. Java kidney tea. It is known in Malaysia as kumis kucing. Now, when the Dutch, or in the East Indies as we used to call it, and were the colonisers of Indonesia, they saw the way in which this herb was used primarily to address kidney problems, and that is where I have mainly used it, and I'll be talking quite excitingly about this at a conference in a couple of weeks. But get on the net, have a look, punch in Wikipedia, and have a look at Orthosiphon stamineus or Java kidney tea, and you'll be excited there at the way in which this herb is being put forward as having potential to address some symptoms associated with early dementia. Now, I'll go no further than that because I don't want to be seen as a quack. I'm excited.
No.
I'm excited because I'll say something that further intrigues me and will stimulate our conversation. The herb rosemary, we frequently make the statement, rosemary for remembrance. Well, really, it's rosemary for memory. And rosemary has long been used in European tradition, as a herb primarily to address memory deficit.
Yep.
The fact that we wear it on Anzac Day, etc., is wonderful, but in fact it's a herb that has a reputation, a folk reputation, for early cognitive deficit. Now, the interesting thing is, if that is so, rosemary, the herb, contains a chemical constituent known as rosmarinic acid. Rosmarinic acid. Now, interestingly, Java kidney tea contains rosmarinic acid. That's what makes me think that there's a connection here, and that the claims being made. And when you read the article from Wikipedia, you'll see that I'm not going over the top.
Oh no, definitely not going over. So I mean, I listen to your program. I mean,
Yes.
we, our radio in the office and in the car is always on to you, so we listen to your program.
Good.
And being from an ethnic background,
Yes.
my mum is very, very much so on mint teas and parsley and
Good
the
on
rest
it.
of those things.
Good on it.
So all those things,
Yes.
I've grown up with.
Of course, and look, that's a wonderful thing
Yeah.
about where we're at in this country. That the multicultural nature of it has meant that we've got all the input of all these cultures that have made our understanding of the world and even medicine a lot better. But you have a look at that. Both those herbs, ginkgo and Java kidney tea, are very safe, albeit with the ginkgo. If your dad is on blood thinning medication, etc., you should discuss that.
No, the only medication he takes is half a blood pressure tablet of a night time, and he's 84. There's nothing else.
Well, he's in the same ballpark as I am, because that's all I take as well.
There you go. Well, Mediterranean sort of diet, and then that's all you need.
Well, you tell him to keep on that. He would have. Is he Greek?
No, Macedonian.
Well, close.
Close, very close.
Close. Well, Alexander the Great had pretty good genes, you know. He took on half the world and won every battle, so he must have had a few herbs going for him.
I'd say so.
Right.
I appreciate you taking my call, Dennis.
Good on you, mate. Okay,
Thanks
thank
for
you.
your call, Steve. Now, Jenny was also ringing about memory loss, but I think she's had to go, and I hope she was listening to that.
Yeah.
However, we did have a call from Carolyn from Newcastle East. She's not on the line now, but she rang in to ask if spirulina is good for general health.
Carolyn, look, for general health purposes, I would say yes, it's useful. It has developed a place in the market, so there is a demand for it. It's not a substance that thrills me, but people use it because of its purported protein levels. A lot of vegetarians use it. Certainly as a general health measure, if you're into using things like that, I'd encourage it. I tend to go a lot more for things like seaweed and things like that, which are probably in the same ballpark.
So that, I hope, answers your question. And, we've at least Sally out in the office has spoken to Jenny, who isn't on the line.
That's good.
But just to add to what she was saying about memory loss, she had severe trauma in her life.
Yes.
She's a carer and has had her life threatened many times and doesn't retain much now. So important things like ages and birthdays of grandkids.
And look, I think there's an important point here. Memory loss, or whatever you like to call it, is something that can be related not only to ageing, but can be related, in my opinion, to trauma, the blocking out of things. That's a perfectly understandable thing. So it's probably unfair for the recommendations that I've been making today about perhaps trying these herbs to be applicable for all cases. I think that would be unfair. I think it's in those situations where memory loss or blocking out of things is occurring, that is something only that can be worked through by the person themselves with a good counsellor, a good psychotherapist, a good psychologist.
Dennis Stewart and Health Naturally today on 2NURFM, and we are taking your calls. Bruce has rung in from Rutherford. Bruce, you've got a question about Kava and its efficacy perhaps for prostate cancer, yes?
Just prostate problem at the moment.
Prostate problem is good.
Yeah.
So what would you like to ask Dennis?
Well, I didn't quite hear. I've heard him on twice, but sort of missed most of it.
Okay.
The other question I'd like to ask is, how do we get you to listen back on what you said already on this show? I think you can, but I haven't managed to do it yet.
Oh, you mean how can you retrieve previous programs?
Yeah, previous programs, yeah.
Okay. Okay, Jane might like to tell you how to do that.
The best way of doing it is if you can go to the computer, to our webpage, to nurfm.com.au and find the Health Naturally page, or go to the podcasts page, then you'll be able to find the podcast and listen to it there. Podcast of Health Naturally is what you're after.
Right, you can go to the computer right out.
Need the computer, yeah. See, unless you've got the app on your phone, that's another way of doing it.
Doing your R app, is it?
Yep,
Right.
that's right. Yes, and you can listen there. Very easy to listen.
Yeah,
Okay,
that's why I'm
Bruce.
listening.
Okay.
Asking now.
Right.
Yeah, very good.
What I'll do is answer your question. I'm not aware of kava having any direct activity on prostate cancer, but kava is a herb that is documented even in the British Herbal Pharmacopoeia as being useful for some prostate conditions. When a gentleman has something like prostatitis, that is inflammation of the prostate gland, kava has a good reputation of being able to participate in addressing those symptoms and helping resolve them, regardless of whether other medications, conventional medicines or whatever are prescribed. So certainly for something like inflammation of the prostate gland, which can be painful and which can have some inhibiting effect on urination, it is something to think about. The other thing is there is a potential here for the herb to be useful in assisting a urinary activity. In other words, perhaps improving the stream and lessening frequency. But as for being used in prostate cancer, I have nothing that would enable me to say, yes, go for it. In lesser conditions, particularly inflammatory activity, it could be useful.
Yes, I don't have cancer as far as I know.
Good.
Just the other stuff, the stream and the quantity and the pain.
Are you taking anything for that, Bruce?
Only some herbal medicine on the.
Okay. Are you using saw palmetto?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Look, seeing you've rung about the prostate, let me just say that in Western herbal medicine, that herb, above all others, is the one that has the best reputation. Now, saw palmetto, S-A-W-P-A-L-M-E-T-T-O. Some people say saw palmetto. Well, I say saw palmetto. It's actually a palm tree which develops berries, and those berries have been shown to have a significant chemistry associated with them, which is useful in addressing certainly the early stages of prostate enlargement. It's not a cure for the condition. It is something which will participate and help the earlier stage of it and perhaps lessen the drift towards a more serious level.
And how did you spell that again? S-A-W?
S-A-W-P-A-L
P-A-L
M-E-T-T-O.
M-E-T-T-O.
Now, you're at Rutherford. If you go to your pharmacy, they would be bound to have, or your health food store, they would be bound to have a preparation with saw palmetto.
All the very best with that, Bruce. Caroline's on the line now, Dennis, from the Junction. Carolyn, I'm sorry. And your husband has a problem with lots and lots of mucus, I gather.
Yes, he does.
Okay.
He's seen a specialist and
Yes.
he's had the camera up, and yes, he just produces it all the time. He's had massive courses of antibiotics. He
Yes.
uses nasal sprays.
Yes.
He does nasal washes.
Yes.
Everything. He serves, so he washes it out there, but it just keeps
Okay.
coming.
So the mucus that's being produced is coming from the upper respiratory tract, his sinuses. Okay.
Yes, from his sinuses.
Well, look, I think there's some useful things for him to try, which will not clash with any medical management he's having. The first thing to realise is that there are a handful of herbs, and I'll enumerate them for you, the ones that are perhaps most popularly used in Western herbal medicine. Interestingly, the herb eyebright.
Could you spell that, please?
Eyebright, Eyebright, eyebright.
Oh, yes.
It's a leading one. Elder, Elder. Ground ivy, Ivy. And the herb fenugreek, Fenugrek, fenugreek. Now, a professional herbalist or a compounding pharmacist could put those together for you or your husband in a mixture and dose relate it. Otherwise, you could purchase those herbs individually, trying one at a time if you were to do so. I would suggest, for instance, start off with fenugreek. It's simple, it's inexpensive, one can purchase it in numerous forms. If that doesn't give any benefit, move up the ladder if you like. But as I say, compounding would allow your husband to benefit by most of those herbs put together. So there's some of the herbs that we'd think about. The second thing is, interestingly, in what's called biochemic medicine, developed by Dr. Schussler in the 19th century, still a very popular way of using minerals in what we call a biochemic tradition. There is one of them called Kali-Mur, Kalimur, Kali-Mur, which means potassium chloride, but it comes in what's called a homeopathic potency, which is usually 6x. Now, this might sound a little bit esoteric, but let me just say there would be a lot of people out there, lay people, that would have in their medical chest, or medicine chest, a number of Dr. Schussler's cell salts, as they're called, or biochemic remedies. That would be useful to append to it. They are very, very, very inexpensive, and sometimes remarkably effective where everything else fails. The only other thing I would say is that if he's a surfer and working hard with his nasal passages and sucking up a lot of salt water, etc., it's not a bad idea to supplement his diet with a with a flavonoidal supplement. Flavonoids are very protective of the mucous membranes. So bioflavonoids, a mixture made up of those herbs and potassium chloride in the biochemical cell salt pack. If that doesn't fix him up, well, you probably have to divorce him, Carolyn.
Don't do that just yet. Okay, thank you very much for that. I've written that all down.
Right, I see how you
All
go.
the very best with that. Now, Sally says that Scott suffers from excessive oil on his scalp and hair. Do you have any suggestions for him?
That's not an easy one to answer, so perhaps I'll have to have a private conversation with you. I know where you live.
There you go. Well, Dennis, we've got time to talk about chamomile.
Oh dear. Well, in a few minutes I'll do injustice to this herb. What I would say is that anyone who wants, and if there are practitioners out there or pharmacists that are interested in pursuing this, chamomile, unfortunately, is seen by most people as a herb that is useful for addressing insomnia or sleeplessness, particularly in children.
Yeah, a cup of chamomile tea before you go to bed.
I've never found it useful, Jane. I've never found it useful, but in the European tradition it's put forward as being the most important remedy for treating every aspect of gut function, whether it be inflammatory, as in the case of reflux or ulceration, whether it has to do with things like allergenicity or food intolerance, we would call it. People who seem to drift from one level of intolerance to another level, who are restricting from their diet multiple things, very frequently a perseverance with using chamomile over a chronic period of time improves the uptake of nutrients from the gastrointestinal tract and lessens the potential for food intolerance or allergenicity. All this, by the way, is adequately and credibly explained by the good Dr. Weiss. And the other thing about chamomile is it is a remarkable remedy for the large bowel. In conditions of the large bowel, even things like diverticular spasm or pain, mild levels of inflammation in conjunction here with even mainstream medication, and I know the ones that would be prescribed there, meadowsweet is not a conflicting remedy, but it asserts a useful anti-inflammatory effect all the way through the gut, which extends even to the large bowel. There, together with slippery elm and any medical treatment, it's a useful thing to think about for people that are battling, particularly with large bowel disorders, that are not responding as well as what their gastroenterologist would like. Think about chamomile, a chronic period of time on it, supported by daily use of the protective effect of slippery elm.
Now, chamomile is, of course, so very available.
It is indeed.
It?
If you're going to use it, in this case, it is probably better to have it in a solid form, that is a capsule or a tablet, or see a medical herbalist who can dispense it in a liquid extract form in the dosage that's stipulated in such documents as the British Herbal Pharmacopoeia. On the other hand, if you just enjoy chamomile tea, go for it. It's great. I can think of better things to drink, however.
And so it's is it better to have it at night before you go to bed, or any time
if it's
of day?
helping you get to sleep, fine, go for it. I never found it effective with our kids, but they might have been particularly rebellious or noisy or uncooperative. Probably not. But some people claim that it is good. Look, if it helps, it helps.
And maybe not only for kids.
Not only for kids. Look, it's remarkable. What works for one person for insomnia doesn't work for another person. But I must say, I've seen a lot of people with insomnia over the years, and I haven't really seen chamomile surface as one that is as good as other remedies.
Okay, and we'll have to wait till next week to get onto those.
We probably will.
So thank you, Dennis Stewart.
It was good. It was good.
That is Health Naturally for today. We'll be back next Friday on 2NURFM.